Hershey's chocolate is unarguably one of the most successful chocolate brands in the world, but how it got to be there was no easy feat. Milton Hershey literally faced it all: rejection, failure, fear, loss, and everything else. Yet, after 2 failed businesses, he returned to Lancaster and built his business again from the ground up. And this time, he succeeded. If you haven't watched the first part of this video to understand how a little farm boy toiled with his fingers and nails to become the world's chocolate king, then check out our previous video and catch up on the topic: how the Lancaster Empire was built. If there was one thing about Milton, it's the fact that he always believed in himself despite his many failures. So, after yet another failed business in New York, Milton returned to Lancaster and decided to do something entirely different this time: focus solely on caramels. But first, he needed money to fund his newfound goal. He again went to his uncles and Aunt Mattie, selling them this big idea of his new caramel recipe. But no luck. His family was done with him. They basically said he was no different from his father and labeled him the black sheep of the family. With no better options, Hershey turned to his old accountant friend, William Lebkicker. Thankfully, Lebkicker threw him a financial lifeline, loaning him enough cash to give his business another shot. Using leftover supplies from his failed New York shop, Hershey started making caramels again, selling them on Lancaster streets with a handbasket. Now, Aunt Mattie, who initially shut him down for a loan, had a change of heart after seeing he'd made a little progress and loaned him $700 to buy equipment. But this time, Hershey had to pay it back in 90 days. He faced many challenges as his business struggled and was far from repaying the money. But just when he questioned his next move, a British importer discovered Hershey's caramel and was impressed by its unique taste and long shelf life. He placed a huge order, promising to pay up if the candy made it to London in good shape. The hitch? Hershey lacked funds to actually produce and ship the caramels. Desperate, he approached the bank for an additional $1,000 while still facing pressure from the $700 loan. Initially, the bank officer refused, but then, after checking out Hershey's little caramel-making operation, he was impressed. Against all odds, the officer personally signed off on the loan. Immediately, Hershey hired some hands, got the order shipped out, and now all he could do was wait. At first, it seemed like nothing was working out, but just a day before the loan was due, Hershey finally got a letter. Inside, a fat check for 500 British pounds. That's like $65,000 in today's money. He was over the moon and was able to pay off all his debts. Finally, things were looking up, and sales of his Hershey's Crystal Cream caramels took off. With growing success, Hershey expanded in the US, and by 1894, his company boasted several factories, thousands of workers, and over $1 million in sales. Now, this boy who was once the family's black sheep became one of the wealthiest and most respected men in Lancaster. But restless as ever and in search of more growth, Hershey, now in his 30s, decided to check out the Columbian Exposition in Chicago. Little did he know that trip was about to change his life forever. The Hershey's Chocolate Empire. So, let's dive into the sweet journey of Milton Hershey and how his love affair with chocolate turned into a billion-dollar empire. During his visit to the exposition, he witnessed J.M. Lehman's chocolate rolling machine demonstration and was intrigued at first glance. It was like a light bulb moment for him. Chocolate could be mass-produced, and he could make it affordable for everyone. Hershey didn't waste any time. He bought Lehman's setup, headed back to Lancaster, and started playing around with making sweet chocolate. He used his tried-and-true formula of fresh milk, just like he did with caramels, and he nailed it. People were loving his chocolatey creations. But still, despite initially offering over 100 different sweets, Hershey noticed a shift as chocolate gained popularity in Europe, which was encroaching on his caramel business. What did he do? In a bold yet risky move, he decided to sell his successful caramel business in 1900 for $1 million, shifting his focus entirely to chocolate. He then invested the money in a massive factory. He sent his trusted employees to learn chocolate production techniques from competitors overseas, but they eventually came back with no real solution. Facing challenges in mass-producing milk chocolate, Hershey eventually found the solution through a former employee, Johnny Schwalbach. Johnny's method of using condensed milk created a mild and affordable chocolate that could be stored for months without spoiling. Now, Hershey's iconic chocolate bars began selling like hotcakes at 5 cents each. By 1906, sales hit $1 million. And as the hits kept coming, Hershey's Kisses and almond chocolate bars became the talk of the town. Eventually, the company's rapid growth led to the construction of the world's largest factory and the development of Hershey, Pennsylvania, a town complete with modern amenities and even an orphanage, the Hershey Industrial School. But sadly, as he was becoming more successful, those he loved the most were mostly ill. His wife Catherine's health worsened, and at this time, he had already lost his father and Aunt Mattie. Eventually, Catherine lost the fight to pneumonia in 1915. This broke Milton, and the only way he could cope with the grief was to throw himself deeper into his business. He then decided to go on a much-needed vacation to Cuba. There, he totally fell head over heels for the people and the culture. But what he found was even more interesting. He discovered that Cuba was sitting on a gold mine of sugar. A fresh idea immediately kicked in to build a sugar mill in Cuba. Taking inspiration from his previous success in Dairy Church, he also thought, why not build a whole town and community here? With that, Hershey went all out, constructing the most advanced sugar mill you could ever imagine. But it wasn't just about sugar. He built modern houses, schools, and health clinics for his new workers. Because of this, Hershey not only had the benefit of bringing fresh milk from the farmland of Dairy Church, but he could also export his own sugar at an affordable price. Not too long after that, the First World War broke out in 1914. And sugar suddenly became very scarce and expensive. And while many other companies were struggling to stay in place, you guessed it, Hershey managed to survive the war by using the resources he had. He even signed a deal with the US Army to supply massive amounts of cocoa and chocolate bars to soldiers, which helped to put the Hershey brand on the global map. By the end of the war, Hershey's chocolate sales skyrocketed to over 20 million annually. But then, a personal storm hit. In 1920, Milton faced another heartbreak. His mother Fanny passed away. It was indeed a tough time, especially with the fierce competition and other chocolate brands going all out on flashy ads. However, Milton stuck to his guns, focusing on a select few products. As a result, sales didn't just climb, they shot up to a mind-boggling $41 million by 1929. Hershey continued steering the ship as the CEO of his chocolate business until his retirement in 1944, at the ripe age of 87. Sadly, a year later, he passed away, but his legacy still lives on, as the Hershey Company is now one of the biggest chocolate brands with a market cap north of $40 billion as of 2023.